Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're plunging into a topic that's, absolutely fundamental to how businesses think and operate risk. We've got a stack of source material you've shared, and our mission, really, is to act as your guides.
Yeah, to sort of extract the most important nuggets about this key distinction between strategic risks and operational risks.
Exactly, because risk isn't just some abstract idea, is it?
Not at all. It's woven into, every single aspect of business life, from a tiny admin task right up to the biggest boardroom decision.
Right.
And the material we're looking at really highlights that risk management isn't just, good practice.
It's more than that.
It's essential. Essential for business governance and, critically, a safeguard for everyone with a stake in the business stakeholders.
And because risk is just so pervasive, businesses can't just lump it all together. They need to categorize.
Absolutely key. It gives structure, allows for analysis, and helps assign responsibility.
You could group risks functionally, maybe, like IT risks or production risks.
You could, but the sources make this, I think, really useful distinction. They separate out the risks fundamental to the organization's very existence, its long-term prosperity.
Those are the strategic ones.
Exactly, strategic risks. And then there are the risks impacting day-to-day activities, more short-term focus. Those are the operational risks.
And that's the split we're really diving into today.
Right, and once they're categorized, the analysis kicks in, looking at the probability, how likely is it to happen?
And the impact. What are the consequences if it does happen?
That assessment is, crucial for deciding how to respond.
Absolutely. So let's jump into that first big category then, strategic risks.
Okay, so strategic risks. These stem directly from the fundamental decisions leadership makes, specifically about the organization's objectives.
So it's basically the risk of failing to achieve those big picture goals.
Precisely. And the sources break this down a bit further, which is helpful. They talk about two main types within strategic risk. First, you've got business risks.
Okay.
These come from decisions about the actual products or services. So developing them, marketing them.
Economic factors affecting sales.
Yeah, or costs, or even technological changes that, impact how you produce or sell things, all that stuff.
Got it. And the second type?
Non-business risks. These don't arise directly from the products or services.
An example.
The source material mentions risks associated with long-term sources of finance, how a company funds itself over the long haul.
What's interesting, though, is that the level of strategic risk isn't just about internal decisions, is it?
No, not solely. Competitor actions can massively increase the risk in your markets.
Sure.
And rapid tech developments can suddenly make your products, or even how you make them, obsolete. A lot of it is external, requires constant vigilance.
Which brings us neatly to responsibility. Who owns these strategic risks?
Well, they're inherently linked to the board's decisions on objectives and direction. Their strategic planning, their decision-making processes, that's paramount here.
And you see that reflected in governance recommendations, like the UK Cadbury report.
Exactly, a real landmark report. It suggests boards should have a formal schedule of matters that are specifically reserved for their decision.
We're talking the big stuff here.
Oh yeah, significant acquisitions or disposals, major investments, large capital projects, treasury policies. These aren't minor tweaks. They need that intense board focus.
And to make those high-stakes calls effectively, the board needs good information.
Rich information. Not just internal performance data, though that's important, but a deep understanding of the external environment too.
Economic trends, competitors.
The competitive landscape, technological shifts, yeah.
And governance reports often recommend balanced boards for this reason.
Balanced in terms of skills, knowledge, experience.
Precisely. To ensure they have that breadth of vision needed to properly assess these strategic risks. But here's a really crucial point the sources make. Even if a board follows all the best practices, has the right procedures.
It doesn't automatically guarantee they'll make the correct decisions.
Right. Process is vital, but outcomes aren't certain.
Exactly. And there was this report from SEMIFAC, that's the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants and the International Federation of Accountants.
Okay.
And highlighted some key issues behind strategic success and, failure.
Like what?
Things like the clarity and the actual choice of the strategy itself. And then, crucially, the ability to actually execute that strategy.
Makes sense. Strategy without execution is just talk.
Pretty much. They also pointed to the capacity to respond quickly, to abrupt changes or fast-moving conditions, adaptability.
And wasn't there one specific issue they flagged as particularly significant?
Yes, absolutely. Unsuccessful mergers and acquisitions. That was identified as the most significant factor in strategy-related failure.
Wow. That really underscores the potential scale of getting strategic decisions wrong.
It really does. Now, when it comes to managing these strategic risks, the sources offer some valuable ways to think about it.
Okay.
First, just acknowledging that sometimes taking on strategic risk is simply necessary.
You mean you can't avoid it?
Sometimes, yes. An organization might have to take significant risks just to expand, or maybe even just to continue existing long-term.
Like developing a brand new product where the tech is uncertain or competition is fierce.
Exactly. That's a big risk. But the alternative might be just sticking with products in mature markets where sales are flat or declining. So sometimes the risky path is the one you actually have to take for survival or growth.
Interesting. What else?
There's also the idea of accepting certain strategic risks, but only temporarily,
Okay.
while actively planning to reduce or eliminate them over a longer time frame. The example given is relying on a key raw material with a volatile global supply.
So short-term exposure, but you're working on a long-term fix.
Right. Maybe redesigning production processes to use less of it, or none at all eventually.
And then presumably some strategic opportunities just need to be avoided altogether.
Absolutely. If the potential negative impact is just too great threats to physical safety, for instance, or if the probability of success is simply too low compared to the potential returns, it's a clear no-go.
This brings us to a really interesting point the sources make about two types of errors directors can fall into.
Yes, the go errors and stop errors.
Tell us about go errors first.
Okay, a go error is when directors unwisely pursue an opportunity. They take the risk, it materializes, and the losses end up outweighing any potential returns.
Basically, you made a bad bet and it cost the company.
Correct. But the sources also highlight these stop errors, and they argue these can be potentially very serious too.
What's a stop error?
That's when directors don't take an opportunity that maybe in hindsight they really should have pursued.
And the danger there is?
The danger is a competitor spots it, steps in, takes that opportunity and benefits. Their business grows, maybe yours gets left behind.
It's that tricky balance leaders always face, isn't it? The risk of doing something versus the risk of doing nothing.
It really is a constant calculation.
Okay, so that covers strategic risks. Now, let's shift gears to the other big category, operational risks.
Right. Now, while boards absolutely must focus on those strategic risks we just discussed.
There's a danger they can get too focused on the high-level strategy.
Exactly. And neglect what's actually happening on the ground within the organization. Day-to-day stuff.
And that neglect can be just as damaging, can't it?
Oh, definitely. If your machines keep breaking down, or your best people are leaving because they're unhappy, or poor product quality is driving customers away.
The business could be in serious trouble, regardless of the grand strategy.
Precisely. These are all examples of operational risks. They're defined as those risks connected with the internal resources, systems, processes, and importantly, employees of the organization.
The sources give some really vivid examples here, don't they? There's one about low probability but high impact.
Yes, the failure to protect sensitive data. The Dixon car phone case is used to illustrate this.
Tell us about that one. It sounds serious.
It was very serious. Back in 2018, the company announced that personal information for about 10 million customers might have been accessed, going back to 2017.
Wow.
An investigation by the ICO, that's the UK's Information Commissioner's Office, found a cyber attack had installed malicious software on thousands of tills, over 5,000 of them.
And it went undetected.
For 9 months, collecting huge amounts of data, leaving customers vulnerable to financial theft, identity fraud.
Terrible.
The ICO concluded the security was poor, inadequate steps were taken, and it breached the old Data Protection Act 1998. They got the maximum fine possible under that law at the time.
A stark reminder of the impact of operational failure, especially around data.
Definitely a high-impact example. But there's also the other side, high probability, low-impact examples.
Right, like the factory burglary example.
Yeah. Think about maybe insufficient security measures leading to frequent but maybe small burglaries at a factory.
A single break-in might not be catastrophic. A few items stolen, maybe minor damage.
Correct. Small impact individually. But, as the sources point out, if it happens regularly because the underlying security issues aren't fixed,
then the cumulative effect becomes significant over time. Lots of small impacts add up.
exactly, it becomes a big problem.
So who's actually responsible for managing all these operational risks? The board can't possibly micromanage every single one.
No, absolutely not. But they are responsible for ensuring that the overall systems and controls are in place throughout the organization to deal with them effectively.
Okay, so how does that cascade down?
Well, the sources outline several key roles. You might have a dedicated risk committee, possibly set up by the board itself.
What would they do?
Their job would be to monitor risk exposure, review actions taken, look at risks that have actually happened, assess the aggregate level of risk.
Sort of overseeing the whole picture.
Yeah, deciding which risks are most significant, setting priorities for controls, liaising with internal audit, that kind of thing.
And supporting them.
You might have a specific risk management function. They'd be responsible for establishing the framework, the policies, promoting risk management through, say, information and training.
And reporting on risk levels.
Exactly. Reporting upwards on overall risk levels within the business.
Then you get down to the operational level itself. Line managers.
Crucial role. A key part of their job is managing the operational risks within their specific area.
Dealing with local issues?
Yes. Like, are people working excessive hours, which could lead to mistakes? That's an operational risk they need to assess. And they feed information upwards to senior managers.
And ultimately,
the employees themselves are responsible for taking the individual steps needed to control operational risks in their day-to-day work.
But management needs to equip them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Senior management has a critical responsibility to ensure that employees collectively have the knowledge, the skills, the understanding to actually operate those internal controls effectively. It's a shared responsibility, really.
That layered approach across the organization makes a lot of sense. Now, how does the management of these operational risks differ based on that probability impact thing we talked about?
Well, the sources note that analyzing operational risk is often, more complex than strategic risk.
Why is that?
Just the sheer number and variety of them. You need evidence from so many different parts of the business.
Okay. And the management approach itself, does that differ?
Yes, it does. For those low probability, high impact risks like the data breach we mentioned, or maybe a major IT system failure,
What do you do there?
management might use insurance. The example given is a sporting venue insuring against losing revenue if a big event gets canceled unexpectedly.
Or contingency planning.
Definitely. Like having alternative IT facilities ready to go if the main system fails, backups, disaster recovery.
And the controls for these big risks are mainly about
Prevention. They're normally designed primarily to prevent these high consequence risks from happening in the first place. Stop it before it starts.
right. Prevention makes sense when the potential fallout is huge. But what about the other kind? The high probability, low impact ones.
Those frequent smaller issues, like the regular burglaries example,
How are they managed?
they're typically dealt with using controls designed more to detect problems when they arise, or to correct them quickly afterwards.
So not necessarily stopping them entirely.
Often, no. These detection or correction controls often serve to reduce the risks rather than eliminating them completely. You might put in better locks to deter some burglaries, or faster alarms to catch them sooner, or quicker repair processes.
But you might not eliminate the possibility entirely, unlike the preventative goal for the high impact risks.
Exactly. It's a different focus, more about managing the ongoing impact.
Okay, so pulling all of this together, what's the big takeaway from this distinction between strategic and operational risk? Why does it matter for effective risk management?
Well, as the sources conclude, for risk management to be genuinely effective, leadership needs a solid grasp of both sides of the coin.
They need to understand the major strategic risks tied to their chosen direction.
And be aware of the potential operational problems that could be brewing in the day-to-day workings of the business. You need both perspectives.
Because risk and, doing anything in business initiative, they're inseparable, aren't they?
Fundamentally, you can't make decisions or move forward without taking some sort of chance. But by taking that wider view of risk management,
Looking at both the strategic horizon and the operational ground level.
organizations can significantly limit the trouble that risks can cause. It gives them a more complete picture.
And understanding this distinction, why does it matter for you, the listener?
Well, it helps you see how organizations try to anticipate potential challenges. Whether you're, diving into a new industry, prepping for a meeting, or maybe just curious about how businesses navigate all this uncertainty.
It shows the different layers involved in safeguarding against things going wrong. Exactly. Both at the highest strategic level and woven into the fabric of daily operations. It gives you a framework, really, to understand the types of threats any organization faces.
And who within that organization is typically focused on dealing with them.
Precisely.
So to recap simply, strategic risks, big picture, objectives, the environment, largely managed at the top. Operational risks, internal, day-to-day processes, systems, people with responsibility flowing down through the organization.
And understanding both is crucial for overall business health and resilience. That's the key message from the sources.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave you with, building on what we've discussed. The source material highlights the danger of both go errors, taking risks unwisely, and those potentially serious stop errors, not taking opportunities you should have.
That constant tension.
So the question is, how do leaders truly calibrate the right level of risk? How do they find that sweet spot between being too cautious and too reckless to ensure their organization's long-term health and success? That's the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? Something to definitely ponder.